Hello everyone, welcome to this week's bonus episode, and today we're doing listener questions.
Listener question time. It's been ages, hasn't it? I haven't done a listener questions for like half a year or more.
Can't believe it.
We've had so much other stuff going on, and this is the one that we come to when don't know what else to do, but it's always fun.
We get questions all the time like, how are you so cool? And how could I be like you? And how do you know so much about Coronation Street? And how come you didn't know that about Coronation Street? And why did you say that when it was wrong? And things like that. But we can't answer them all the time.
Can't answer all that. We're going to do some deep thinking about our lovely listener questions this week, aren't we? Really hard. We've if you would like to have some put some questions forward for us to answer in a listener questions segment, just email them in to us, or we sometimes put posts up on our Facebook group where people can suggest them. We've actually had some really, really good ones come in over the last week or so. Some of them have come in since we decided which questions to do this time, so no doubt over the course of the next 6 months or so we'll maybe get in another couple of episodes where we'll be able to hopefully answer some of those. But so we're gonna just be having a think about what some of our listeners want us to talk about. It's probably gonna say it's going to be a fairly short episode. It's already quite late when we're starting. It's a school night and everything. World Book Day today, as we're recording this. World Book Day 2025. Couldn't go in as Gary Windass with my new ITV Reloved purchase, but Where's Wally was my character of choice. Gemma?
What was your favourite book?
When?
Ever.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Don't land that on me on World Book Day. I always usually go for like the really obvious cliche one, like Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, because that is my favourite, the Harry Potter book. Good, yeah. What's yours?
101 Sauces and Salsas from Sainsbury's.
Nice. Anyway, look, this isn't about Coronation Street. We should have mentioned the Coronation Street book, but they're all quite good.
40 years of Coronation Street.
There we go. So
Treasures of Coronation Street.
We have got two questions today that we're going to be nattering about, and the first one is from Tom. And this question was in relation to the equity strike in 1961 to 1962, but with a modern twist. He says, if industrial action took place today, which 14 characters would you use to keep the show going over the next 9 months? This is going to be quite a challenge, isn't it? Because This, like I said, this is a reference to the 1961-62 equity actors strike, which we've talked about a couple of times before on the podcast, where basically, for about a 7-month period or so, Coronation Street was reduced to a cast of 14 core members. Well, they kind of started dribbling out at the beginning of November 1961. And then by, I think, January 1962, there was only 14 left. And they had to stay there until the strike was over, basically. Everyone back then had to be in equity to be in ITV because this is early days of television and it was just catching on. They thought, we're onto something here. And then actors started asking for more money because I think they were paid a fair pittance back in the early days of TV. They actually wanted to go from 10 guineas to 36 guineas per episode.
That's quite a lot,
I don't know what that is.
That's quite a lot of
quite a price hike.
What is a guinea?
Or if you had more than 10 lines in an episode, 44 guineas. And ITV said no. So Equity at the end of June 1961 said, right, no new contracts, don't sign anything, we're going on strike. Beginning of November, the strike happened, and then it was May time, I think, the following year that it got resolved, and then people started to dribble back into it. So
something dribbling.
Well, it was a bit of a dribble, wasn't it? I don't know. They came back in dribs and drabs. What do you want me to say? So over the course of that time, we had 14 characters, and then there were like a couple of kids. They filled up some of the storylines with animals, didn't you? This was the period where they had the sea lions in the bath and Dennis Tanner acquiring a monkey for a couple of episodes. But you were left with some of the core residents of the street. You had Annie and Jack Walker, the landlord and landlady of the Rovers. You had Albert Tatlock. You had Frank Barlow and Ken Barlow, Harry and Concepta Hewitt, Elsie and Dennis Tanner, Florrie Lindley in the shop, and then characters who kind of lived outside of the street but still continued to appear on the show were Ena, Minnie and Martha, the three old ladies in the snug, and Len Fairclough as well. And that was it. We've watched bits of this, haven't we? There's a few things available on YouTube. What are your thoughts on how that Coronation Street was able to cope with that reduced cast list for that period.
Well, they relied on some funny little things, didn't they? Like, they would have people, Lucille's kind of like what they did with Tracy, going up to listen to her tapes.
Lucille was supposedly there. Lucille Hewitt, Harry's daughter, was supposedly there all this time. They just never showed her.
And Christine as well.
Yeah, Christine Hardman at number 13. She never moved out, but she made kind of a grand reappearance around like June, July time of 1962, and it was supposed to be that she'd been there all along. But from the episodes that we've seen, I think they managed to hide it quite well.
I mean, they were really lucky that most of the core characters were in the show.
Yeah.
And maybe this was part of the reason why these characters became so important. I don't know. But, you know, you got the landlord and the landlady, that's great. Then you had a couple of couples. Well, you didn't really, no, did you? You had Harry and Concepta.
Yeah.
Then you had Elsie and Dennis, who
mother and son.
So
yeah, I mean, not much in the way of.
It was kind of good to not have to rely on romance, but Corrie didn't really do that back in the day anyway.
But then, you know, I think the thing that's fair to say about this particular period is that yes, there were 14 core characters there. But how many characters were there to begin with? I'm going to say there weren't that many extras. So you at the beginning of the strike, you had Esther Hayes, who lived at number 5, who appeared for a little bit in November, I think. And Linda and Ivan Chevesky were in it for a little bit. I think Emily Nugent and Leonard Swinley managed to keep going a month or two. So really...
There were 29 main cast members.
In 1961.
About half of them were gone.
Yeah, but out of that 29, I mean, this is from the list that Corriepedia has put together. Out of that 29 characters, you also had characters like Ida Barlow, who was dead by the time this happened. You had David Barlow, you had Billy Walker, they'd left already in the summer. And then there are a couple of very minor characters making up the rest of the list. Like Alf Roberts obviously went on to be a huge stalwart of the show, but back in 1961, 62, he was very much a in and out, very much a bit part kind of character. Sheila Birtles, similar. Jed Stone, he was never on the show for that long. So I'm going to say that the vast majority of the main characters did actually stay.
Yeah, so, I don't know how they pulled this off. I don't know if they knew it was coming and they quickly made sure that they signed everybody on that they could for a year.
Yeah, I wonder.
You know, the people that were there were some of my favourite characters anyway.
Yeah.
So...
It was just very, very lucky that people like Doris Speed could stay on, because you had to have Annie Walker in the pub. You couldn't have had just Jack running it for all that time. It would have looked weird. And Ina, Minnie and Martha together, I mean, imagine if one of those three hadn't been able to make it into it. It just wouldn't have felt right.
This was quite almost seminal of Coronation Street, really. I wonder how much of the success of the show was down to focusing on this core cast. And maybe we'll talk about what classic Coronation Street really is in a bit. But maybe this is where the idea of what classic Coronation Street is comes from, because you know we don't have lots of romance. But we did have some weird, stupid stunts and crazy stuff happening, because there were seals in the bathtub.
Yeah.
And we had Dennis running around with crazy capers and ideas and.
Yeah,
all kinds of weird stuff.
There was supposed to be an episode where they thought that one of the houses was haunted on the terrace, and then they went in. It was the house that Linda and Ivan had vacated, I think. So they did fill it with some odd ideas, and I imagine that by the time they got to the end of this strike action, they were really clutching at straws for how to fill it. But from what we could see and from the episode descriptions that we've read, it managed to keep on going quite well, and it was very lucky that the characters who couldn't stay in, like Lucille, you know, she was a teenager. That doesn't matter when we're used to Coronation Street these days. Teenagers going AWOL for months and months and months on end, aren't we? Because the actors are doing their exams or what have you. And then you got characters like, Esther Hayes was never a huge part in Corrie anyway. The fact that Emily Nugent as she was back then, Leonard Swindley, lived and worked off the street, it didn't feel quite so unusual that we weren't seeing them. So I think the challenge that we've been set by Tom to cut it down to 14 core cast members now is going to be a heck of a lot more difficult than it would have been back then. Had these 14 been there by producer's choice, of course.
Well, let's not forget also, it's not doing like for like. It would be more comparable to cut the cast in half, I think. And a lot of people would actually say you probably should do that as it is. Because not only did you have only about 30 people to begin with, but also you only had 2 episodes a week. And now we've got 6 episodes a week and we've got nearly 100 people.
Yeah, it would be absolutely impossible to run Coronation Street these days, the same number of episodes. I know we're going down to 5 episodes next year, sorry. It'd be impossible to keep it going with 14 characters. But for the sake of Tom's question, I don't think it matters. He wants 14, right. So I think we need to go down to 14. And damn the working hours of these poor actors.
No, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the episodes to 2 a week.
You can if you want to.
That's
you want to. So what kind of factors do you think we need to consider when we're coming up with our Hot 14?
If you're not on the street, if you don't live on the street, or, there's not a set for you, you're out. That's my first thing I'm going to do. Yeah,
I think we would have to cut this down to Coronation Street only. And anyone who lives on the outskirts, I think you're going to be quarantined.
I'm also going to focus on keeping family units together. And I'm also going to think about, I forgot what I was going to say then, but I think that, Audrey's gone, sorry, but the Platts probably I'll keep there.
I mean, Audrey doesn't live on the street anyway. She can certainly be on Grasmere Drive.
That's what I mean, she can go. But I've just forgotten it again. If you haven't been in the show yet, you're out.
What do you mean?
There are a few people who just haven't been in the show yet, who are main cast, who haven't been on the show, like Ed.
Oh, they haven't been on it yet this year.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
It's March now. You haven't been in it. You're not turning up, then get out.
Yeah, I mean...
We can do without you then, can't we? I would honestly have put Brian and Mary in that too. Not to be harsh, but they only just appeared the other day.
I think if we're cutting down to 14, these have got to be characters that we can really carry the show during the 5, 6, 7 months that this hypothetical strike is going on.
I don't
think Brian's going to do that.
Too dramatic though. I need there to be a balance. I need there to be, so it can't just be like all the best dramatic actors, because then what stories would we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think by the sounds of it, a lot of the comedy during the original Equity strike was carried over by Dennis Tanner. Yeah. Who was a brilliant comic character, but then you did have,
you needed Elsie to be his.
Yeah.
Yeah, oi, like that.
Yeah, and then you had Ina, Minnie and Martha as a unit in the Snug. You had Frank and Ken as the family unit, Annie and Jack. But yeah, I think that maybe having one comic relief character in there would be quite a good idea. I mean, these days, there's barely any of that type of character anyway, are there? So, I don't know, maybe we don't have a comic relief, because who are we picking from, Are we saying Mary or Brian or do we go with Debbie? Because I wouldn't say no to Debbie.
Debbie would be a tough one though, wouldn't she? Because you've got to then... I don't know.
If you have Debbie, do you have to have Ronnie? And I don't know whether Ronnie would be making my top 14
Ronnie's not
here.
In it. No. Yeah. None of the Baileys, I'm sorry, but none of the Baileys, because they have not appeared yet. I don't think. Has Dee Dee even been in it?
Yeah, Dee Dee's been in a handful of episodes this year, so's Michael. But we've seen already from the start of 2024 that, unsurprisingly, the street can keep on going without Bailey contribution. As much, I don't mind the Baileys at all.
Dee Dee carried the show last year, didn't she?
Yeah.
But I think, it wasn't because she was in the Baileys that she was centre stage. It was a completely different side story.
Yeah.
So if the Baileys went, I don't know anyone would notice, and that really hurts me, because I think the Baileys are great and I wish they were in it more. But you got to work with this, what you're doing. You got 14. This is really hard work. So number one, I think we need to have the landlady or the Rovers.
I think we do, because if we're saying sorry, anywhere outside of the confines of Coronation Street is out, they're not going to Speed Dial anymore. They're not going to Prima Donna. They're not going to...
I didn't necessarily say that. I just said if you don't live on the street, you're not in it.
Okay, but I still think that having the Rovers back as the hub of the street, and everybody wants that these days anyway, but it makes sense as a gathering place for this mishmash of characters that we're going to be creating here to chew the cud at the end of the day.
Are you written down numbers?
No. Do you want me to write down? But we might change it as we go. I'll write down. I've got my pen and paper here.
Is it working?
So, yeah, it's fine. So we're saying Jenny's there.
Jenny, number one.
But does Jenny carry the Rovers on its own? Because we didn't notice from the episodes that we saw from this original period, like there wasn't often a time when we were thinking, oh, where's so and so, or so and so's missing. And again, it's partly because there wasn't that much of a cut at the end of the day.
Did they
but they can't have that. Oh, go on, what?
Did they have a hiring freeze as well?
Yeah. They
Okay.
I mean, anyone that they hired would have had to have been in equity.
So we can't just hire 50 new people.
No. So we've got Jenny, but does Jenny run the pub single-handedly, and do we just assume that everybody else is in the background? We possibly could. I mean, I think that, you know, the likes of if Ryan is going to be out. I don't think people are going to be clamouring for Gemma and Chesney necessarily. So Gemma as a barmaid, no. I'd quite like Glenda, but I don't know whether Glenda could carry a story. Although, would this be an opportunity to finally give her one?
Daisy.
Daisy is a possible. I mean, I wonder whether having Daisy and Daniel still. I mean, one of the factors, I don't know whether we need to consider this or not. I assume it was a consideration back in the early 1960s. Is the current stories that are underway? Are we going to have to carry them on and then quietly retire other stories? Because back in when the equity strike started, there were a couple of stories that were just quickly dropped, like. Elsie had just met up with old flame Bill Gregory, hadn't she? And just before the strike started, it looked like they were getting back together again. Strike started, the actor who played him couldn't be in it anymore, so then she just gets a letter or a phone call or something saying, oh, I've gone back to London. So some stories were cut. Do we say, well, we kind of in the middle, if this strike is happening now, are we saying, well, we got to keep the Daniel Daisy stuff going?
Right, here's a dilemma for me, because one of the families I'm going to really want to keep is the Platts. But I don't give a crap about the Harvey money rubbish. I think it's boring as hell. So would I be shooting myself in the foot here by bringing the Platts in? Because I'll tell you what, the Platts at the moment, the story they're having is one of the worst they've ever had. And I'm just being very brutal here. This is brutal.
The thing that we got to consider, maybe, if we're trying to integrate it seamlessly into the current goings on the street, is as of the time of recording, David's just been hit by a car. He's looking a bit poorly, isn't he?
Yeah.
Do we say, sorry, David's out because he's in a coma for 5 months,
out,
and that's why
in a coma.
That's
Max
why we
is
can't
out,
see it.
He's in prison.
Yeah.
Shona's out. She's looking after David. Audrey's out because she's probably gone to live in France to get away from all the rest of the idiot family. Who have we got? I mean, Nick and Sarah.
I wouldn't mind keeping Sarah, but then she's kind of who if we're taking all those other characters out, who's she doing, you know, who's she integrated with? She'd be left on her own.
Everyone feels very diffuse, don't they? Like,
yeah.
There's
Are there any characters kind of living on the terrace side of the street? So we've got the Baileys we got the Barlows, we've got the Baileys, we've got Ches and Gemma, we got the Alahans, we got who's next? Who's at number 9? Eileen, the Grimshaw clan. We got
Dev.
we got we said
and then Webster's.
Yeah.
I'm feeling brutal.
Sorry, Tyrone and Fizz as well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind.
I'm feeling really brutal.
I wouldn't mind keeping Tyrone and Fizz, but I don't know whether they'd actually be needed because representing.
What would they do?
Well, they could get up to some gentle.
Don't forget, right? Are their children all dead now?
No, because we can say we can keep the. Oh, we can't keep.
Keep what?
No, I don't think we can keep Ruby and Hope in it, can we?
Why?
That's going against the rules, maybe.
Why the rules?
Well,
what's the rules?
No, as in we can't keep them as extras on top of the 14.
No. Now, you see, you think about it like this, okay? You keep Hope, Ruby, Fizz and Tyrone. That's like a third of your entire cast.
Yeah,
in one family.
True.
No.
It's really, really tough because we've got to have some on the street there. I mean, what about Abby, Kevin, Debbie as a unit? Do we keep them together? It feels, or what about opposite? I think that Sally and Tim could really shine here. And they're kind of living on their own there, aren't they? There's nobody else in that family, in it.
I'd rather have Kevin, Abby, and Debbie than Tim and Sally.
But that's very controversial. I suppose that I don't know what Debbie would do. Although Debbie doesn't live on the street, does she? So maybe she's... And we have been, through long periods with no Debbie. But we could keep Kevin and Abby, I suppose.
Yeah, this is a good... Yeah, they're good comparable couples, aren't they? To consider. Sally and Tim versus Abby and Kevin.
Or do we keep all 4 of those characters because they've obviously got a lot to do with each other? We don't want to have a situation necessarily where you got your Abby and Kevin storyline, and then somewhere else you got your completely disconnected Tim and Sally storyline.
This is really difficult.
I know we gave
I
this
didn't think this would be too hard.
We didn't give this any thought beforehand.
No.
Before we started recording. So I'm kind of wondering, and I'm going to write this down, but it's not set in stone if we're saying Abby and Kevin and Sally and Tim.
We've got 5 already.
We got 5 there. We've got 9 characters left to film. We could cut some of these. Just as a little pause, I did ask ChatGPT who it would pick, and it obviously doesn't have a clue what it's talking about, but I don't know what you think about this. We got Ken, Rita, Steve, Leanne, Roy, Carla, Tyrone, Sarah, David, Gemma, Chesney, Nina, Dev and Evelyn, and it did give me its reasons for picking those, but I don't think that some of them deserve to be here at all. I mean, sorry Rita, but
no,
we only see you a handful of episodes a year anyway, so you're not going to be carrying the show, sadly, when we're down to 14 and the work schedule gets ramped up somewhat.
I wouldn't be mad about Ken.
I wouldn't be mad about Ken.
I think Ken would be fun to put in because he was in the first lot. And he'd be like, it reminds me of the old days. Like that.
I think that keeping the character of Ken going, and I think William Roach could manage it.
If it's only 2 episodes a week, he'd walk it.
So do we put Ken and Tracy? Or do we put Ken, Tracy, Steve? Is Cassie still in it? No, probably not. I don't know what's going on with Cassie at the moment.
You don't necessarily have to have everybody have a little buddy.
No, I mean, in the original one, Albert Tatlock was living at number 1 on his own, wasn't he?
By himself would be quite fun. I think it'd be funny if you said that Steve, Tracy and Amy all moved to Spain.
Yeah, I suppose this could be another thing to consider. Like, how would we explain the absence of some characters? Some characters we wouldn't need to explain the absence of. But those, I guess, we may do. What? So you don't want to keep Chesney and Gemma? I'd quite like to keep the Alahans, but again, Deb's already away in India at the moment, and Ardy and Asher. As much as I love both of those, honestly, I don't know whether they're characters the street needs, or are we picking characters that we're saying, well, let's give them a chance in the spotlight because they don't have it so much of the rest of the time.
I'm going to say Asher. I'm keeping Asher.
Is that because, are we still going to keep going with the medical storylines during this? Because Corrie can't let them drop, so we want some kind of tangentially related.
Imagine
or do we keep Gadas in as one of our number 14? Who could do?
Imagine if every time, like every week, somebody ended up in the hospital, and every single time it was just Asher in there, and they're like, where's the doctor? And she's like, look, the doctor's busy. Where's the nurse? The nurse is busy. It's just me here. I just run the hospital by myself. Don't ask any questions.
I wouldn't actually mind, because we've got Ken there. I wouldn't mind saying, well, let's give Ken Amy, and then with Amy, let's keep Ardy and use this little period of downtime to finally get Ardy and Amy together as a couple. What would you think to that?
I'm not keen.
No?
Are you getting rid of Asher?
I might be getting rid of Asher. Let me just put Ardy down, and I'm going to put Amy down, because I think that, again, if Ken's there on his own, he's got to interact with someone. When Albert was on his own, he got about and he spoke to everybody, but he was obviously close to the Barlows next door, Frank and Ken. But I think that, having Ken in a home with Amy, and Elma Vaney's a good little actress, I think that she might be a bit of a contender. I wouldn't be. I'm trying to think. Are we closing the corner shop? Who works at? I can't even remember. Because Ardy still works at the corner shop, doesn't he? He could kind of run the fort there, saying that he's in charge of it at the moment, isn't he?
I'm closing the cabin.
The cabin, I think, can definitely be closed. Again, we haven't seen much of the cabin at all in the past 12 months, so sorry. That's another reason why Brian is out there.
And I'm really sorry, but I'm closing the factory as well, because there's not enough people in it anymore.
Ooh.
Well, who's going to work there? Carla's going to be bored.
That's right. If the factory's open in this hypothetical situation, you've got to have a good swathe of people. And I don't think
who works there now?
Is he
Betsy
on and off? Betsy, yeah. Dirk, obviously.
I think we should send Carla and Lisa and Betsy to LA to enjoy their time in the sun, relax. Don't know how long Lisa's going to stay being a cop for. I don't know how long Carla can be bothered to. I think she needs to recuperate.
I'm not sure. I think that, Carla and Lisa, I don't know whether you know this, do have their fans out there.
They've got big fans. Oh, we don't want to lose the Swala fan base.
Corrie doesn't want to lose the Swala fan base during this time of crisis.
What stories would they have? Because they've already had
they're still
drama.
ongoing, aren't they? Rob's still on the run.
Oh,
I mean, if we were going
to be a character.
If we were going to get rid of them, we could say that Lisa and Carla have disappeared off somewhere because they're worried that Rob's going to come back and get them.
They're hiding in LA for 9 months.
Yeah, because he's really, really scary, Rob Donovan. Look what he could do with it.
Well, if we keep them, what story? They're just going to be... Are we going to have Rob in it?
Well, we want to have some kind of nice romance stuff. I don't think there's any way that we can include Rob in our 14.
Sally and Tim and Abby and Kevin.
But I think that it wouldn't be a bad shout to have Carla and Lisa in. And Carla does live on the street, doesn't she? She lives in the streetcars flat at the moment, just about. Oh, yeah. And Lisa can always be moving in with her. I think Betsy could be out for sure, but
Betsy's gone to university.
Yeah, she suddenly got a passion for studying.
Yeah.
I don't think that Rob needs to be in it because what's he going to do? He's on the run. If he comes back, it'll be for a little cameo appearance. He's not going to integrate himself into the heart of the street for our 7 months that this is going on for. I think he needs to still be on the run, or they just hear that he's been arrested or something.
They could hear him in the alleyway.
Yeah, exactly.
What's that noise? Exactly. It's Rob. Get out of here, Rob, you scoundrel.
Age-wise, we've got a fairly nice mix at the moment, haven't we? So we've got Ken at the top there. And then we've got, your 50s, your Sally, Tim, Abby, Kevin. We haven't got many that are kind of our age-ish, have we? Which is why I'm thinking, who is there of our age? You got the Batters bit. I wouldn't say no to keeping the Batters bit.
But we haven't even put any Platts in. Are we not putting any Platts in?
Well,
David and Shona.
We said that David's going to be in his coma during this time, isn't he? But we could possibly follow Shona. But then if you got Shona, you got automatically Harry, you got Lily, or are they just upstairs at the time? And who out of the characters that we've chosen here is Shona integrating with?
I feel like we're missing loads of people.
We're trying to think, but we're saying we want to base it on characters who live on the street, aren't we?
Wow.
You got Yasmin there. I think we could probably do without her during this time. Sad as I am to say it. You got Dee Dee lives. Does Dee Dee still live in the flat? I don't remember the corner shop flat. It feels like I'd quite like to have Fizz and Tyrone still, and Roby and Hope could still be upstairs.
No, because I don't.
Why? But I like Fizz and Tyrone.
What do they do?
They are. I think they just offer traditional-ish family values.
We've got boring couples already. We've got Kevin and Abby and Sally and Tim.
Okay, so do we put in... put in Daniel and Daisy as a sex appeal?
We've got sex appeals. We've got Carla and Lisa.
Younger sex appeal.
We need some man totty.
Well, do we have... Can we, if we're going to say we got Jenny, give Jenny someone to talk to, keep Daisy in the mix, and put Daniel in there as well.
Hang on a minute.
And then Daniel can then link up with Ken, and you got another little possible unit there. What are you doing, Gemma's...
We've only got 4 men.
Right.
We've got 11 in total, so we've got too many women. We need some men.
Okay, well I say Daniel. Let's pop him.
You want?
I say Daisy and Daniel. Pop them in. Yeah.
Okay. We need more men. We've got one more slot.
Okay.
We need a man.
I don't necessarily think
I need a
Ryan.
Man. Fill my slot.
Oh my gosh.
You don't want Ryan, no.
Don't want Ryan. Don't want Chesney.
Sorry, no. What about Mick?
No, I think we could manage without Mick.
David? No,
David's in the coma still. We never got anywhere with our comic relief character, did we? But I don't really know.
Maybe I'm going to hire somebody new.
Or do we get Evelyn? Because, Evelyn's still on the cast technically, isn't
Evelyn
she?
in there.
So she could add that little bit of extra snark and comedy that Corrie would need. And I could see quite a nice Jenny and Evelyn, could sparring partners maybe? If we were going to have stories or scenes set in the corner shop with Ardy, get Evelyn back in there as well. I mean, we haven't mentioned Roy, and I know we said characters that need to live on the street and he's down Victoria Street, but it feels like if we're looking at, I suppose if we've got legacy characters, we do have Kevin, Sally, Ken in there.
There's loads of people that I've... can I just quickly
Gemma's
give
just
you
looked
a list?
at a cast list online.
Can I just give you a quick rundown of all the people we're missing out on, right?
Are you not looking at the ITV website?
Yeah, we are. It's out of date, but
seriously
we're going to have to deal with it. Okay, so if I'll just say names and you say yes or no. Okay, but we're not necessarily going to put them on the list.
What about whether they should be considered?
Yeah, okay. Right. Ardy, yes. Abby, yes. Adam, no.
No. We don't need
Aggie.
Adam. She's out. So that's how out of date that website is.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't need to say everyone on there because it's going to go on forever.
Alex, no. Alia, no. Actually, well, Bernie, see, I would like Bernie.
Wouldn't mind Bernie, but it'd be odd to have Bernie without having Chesney and Gemma in there.
What about Dev and Bernie?
We have said that Dev's in India, but
if we've got he's allowed to come back. We need him for the good of ITV.
I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't be adverse to having Dev back in here. Who would you cross off?
I'd honestly get rid of Sally and Tim, put Dev and Bernie in.
Okay, well, they'll try it. We'll see how it looks.
Because we've got Asher and Ardy.
What about Steve on there? I suppose if we had Steve and Tim, that could make quite a good comedy couple, though.
But I've got rid of Tim.
Yeah, I know.
Who else have I got in? We haven't even thought about Billy.
Oh yeah, Billy. He just about lives on the street, just popping his foot in.
Chesney and Craig, not really interested. Eileen, anyone from that house? Sean.
Sean doesn't live there anymore, does he? He's out in the precinct. I'd like Eileen, but I don't feel that her and George and even Todd at the moment can carry a story. We have seen that we can live without Eileen from when Sue was out of the show for a bit last year.
Gary and Maria, we haven't even mentioned them, or George.
Yeah, I think we could do without them.
No, Jack, Jenny, Joseph, no, Kirk, no. Mary, no.
What?
No.
What
Nick,
about somebody like Leanne to bolster the numbers of sass and snark?
Well, you've got Evelyn in there.
Yeah, I guess so.
Roy, not Sam.
No.
Steve. Where's Summer?
Well, exactly. I don't think we need Summer at the moment.
No. Yasmin. No, I don't. Honestly, I think, to be honest with you, I think our list is not too bad.
Okay, so have we got a balance? Have we got characters that are going to be integral? Have we got the popularity factor that's going to keep people going? We haven't got a villain here.
I wouldn't say that this is really like the best list that we could have come up with.
This is a live list we're coming up with here. Do you think we're okay without a villain? I mean, there wasn't a villain during the equity strike period.
Well, we've got Tim there.
No, you've taken out Tim. Also, he's not a villain, Gemma.
He's a horrible man.
He's beloved. He's beloved.
He's a horrible man.
So we're saying at the moment, Jenny, Abby, Kevin, Devon, Bernie, Ken, Asher, Ardy, Amy, Carla, Lisa, Daniel, Daisy and Evelyn.
I don't think that's bad. I think that's pretty good.
I think we've got a nice age range there.
We've got lots of links between all these characters.
Yeah, you got Jenny, Daisy, Daniel. That's they can have their little pub adventures, can't they?
Yeah,
Daniel can move into the pub.
Devon, Bernie, Ashiada, whatever. We've got Ken and Amy.
Yeah, Ken, Amy and Daniel are together.
Yeah, and then
Lisa and Carla are in a little world of their own there.
Yeah, I mean, the only person really who's by themselves is Evelyn, but she don't care about that.
No, I would be just having Evelyn being the one who goes between stories. And, yeah, well, no, I'd say going from story to story, sticking her nose in things.
She's replacing Minnie, Martha, and
yeah.
Ina.
Yeah. I think that could work. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think that it'd still be a bit odd that quite so many people weren't appearing. But we're not comparing like for like completely because, like we said at the beginning, they really only did drop a small handful of characters to get down to their 14 back in the original times.
I'm very glad that we've decided to go down to 2 episodes because I would be worried about this otherwise.
Yeah, especially old Dane Maureen.
Yeah, I don't know that we have any ideas for what the stories could be because
Tom didn't ask us that.
Not the scope of the question, is it?
No.
Didn't get any marks for that if you started writing about that in an exam.
No, but I think I'd be most sad to lose the Platts, and I think if David hadn't just gone into a coma and had a very easy get-out clause, I think he would be a shoo-in for staying into the show, to be honest, because they are still a very strong family unit.
Yeah, I do really like them, but I think the problem with them, interestingly, is that they're too big. So they take up quite a lot of our list. We like to have people that can be whittled down.
Yeah. So I'm saying that David's in hospital, Shona and everyone else have gone into witness protection or somewhere.
Yeah, good idea.
Because Harvey can get anyone, anywhere, wherever you are. I think they could move Max onto a prison in the moon and he'd still have a little alien thug there who's just going to shoot him with his ray gun.
That's what aliens sound like. I've come from Harvey.
Yeah, okay, there we go, Tom. There's our list of 14.
Jenny,
we've done it.
Abby, Kevin, Dev, Bernie, Ken, Asher, Ardy, Amy, Carla, Lisa, Daniel, Daisy and Evelyn.
Yeah, we got our medical storylines, we got our police storylines, because we know Corrie can't drop them. We got our pub story.
And how many of them
will
get
we got our romance.
Cancer.
Hopefully none.
You could swap out Evelyn for Debbie if we've got Abby and Kevin, but now
I think keeping Evelyn in would be quite fun.
Yeah. Maybe she and Ken could get
on. Are there any? We said that this could be the opportunity for the the Ardy and Amy romance to blossom at last. I don't think with the characters that we've got there, we're going to be seeing a whole lot of love triangles, are we? We could get Kevin and Sally back. Oh no, we're not keeping Callie and Sally anymore, are we?
No.
Sally.
Forget about them. They're dead.
Abby and Dev, Bernie and Kevin. Do they hook up in a love triangle?
What about Carla and Daisy? Sexy.
I don't think they'd get together.
No, I don't think so. But if you want
especially
to put
considering the financial
pigeons,
situation that Carla's been currently in, partly thanks to Daisy.
Look, this is just you can just put this lot into a what's it called, a tombola. And then just come out with whatever. So
looking at ChatGPT's, we will move on to the next question in a minute. Looking at ChatGPT's selection, how many of those have we actually kept? We've got Ken, we've got Carla, we got Dev and we got Evelyn. So we've got a few of them. But I would really be interested to hear from our listeners who they would pick.
This is a really fascinating
You don't need to decide live. You can take your time to ponder over it.
I do think this is going to be this is going to be a really good question because it really challenges you, and I think Tom's great to have written this in because it really does make you think about what's important. And also, some of my favourite characters are not on this list because I don't think they would work if the show was only 14 people. And with the group, once you start coming up with justifications, like you have to have somebody in the Rovers. You just have to because it's Coronation Street, and at the moment that's Jenny. Unless you wanted to start futzing around and putting in somebody new and then that would change the whole entire list. I do think
you got to have some family units.
But it's interesting, it's kind of like, what's your colour scheme? You just because you like greens and beige doesn't mean that you wouldn't like reds, but you can't have them together because they clash.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So I want to see if who's your core character and how did you come up with your list and what's your list?
Send us in your ideas.
Send us in
Write
little
it in the comments if you listen to this on YouTube.
I think it would be a fun thing to make a little picture of, one of these like picture.
Yeah.
Where all
little
the characters
montage
together. Yeah. Montage.
Okay, right. Thank you very much, Tom, for sending that question in. It is time to move on to our next one. And this is from a similarly 3-lettered name in our listenership.
It's too long otherwise.
John with no H. And he has asked us to define Classic Corrie. What, in your eyes, is classic Coronation Street, says John, in terms of character, plot, dialogue, tone, etc. When someone says, that's classic Coronation Street, what does that mean to you? So I wanted, that when I was kind of putting the call out for questions this time on our Facebook group, I did say that I wanted us to have questions that didn't go down the negative, didn't kind of piggyback onto the current wave of negativity that's awash all things Coronation Street at the moment. But I've gone with this one. I feel that this one has got the potential to get a bit moany about some of the things on current Coronation Street, hasn't it? Because you can say, well, David getting run over by a car in the middle of the street, that's not classic Coronation Street. All that extra music and effects and whatever, that's not classic Coronation Street. So it'd be nice to try and avoid that, but I think it's going to be a little difficult. Do you want to start the ball rolling on this one? And what would you say is classic Coronation Street to you?
Well, if I saw somebody had written that, like, let's be honest here, the only time we ever hear anybody talk about classic Coronation Street is on the internet, and it's normally complaining about current Coronation Street, isn't it? That's what you just said.
Yeah, often. But you do get
it's always used as a benchmark to complain about what's going on now.
It often is, but you also do get interviews with cast members or producers who say, "Oh yeah, so and so is real classic Coronation Street." But Coronation Street as Britain's longest running soap opera, and has got various records for longest this, that, and the other. There's
longest cast
list on any programme ever.
No. Longest cast. If you lay them all down end to end, they're the longest cast in the world.
Well, I think that Kit can.
Well, he just
takes us over the record on his own, really, doesn't he?
We weren't actually going to win it until he joined.
It's been going a long time, and everyone's going to have their favourite era. All of us listening to this, I mean, the vast majority of people listening to this aren't going to remember a time when there wasn't Coronation Street. Everyone's going to remember the time they started watching it. And I think for a lot of people, that formative period when they first tuned into Coronation Street for the first time, that's going to hold a lot of sway in what you call classic Coronation Street, isn't it?
Yep. Well, when I'm thinking about what is classic Corrie, I'm thinking that normally people are saying that it's to do with humour, and it's to do with being able to mix humour and drama together well, and it's about probably there's a few like archetypal character sorts, who also embody it. I don't know. To me, I don't really think that there's such a thing as a Coronation Street, a classic Corrie plot, but I think there's classic Corrie like vibes. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't go, oh look, Daniel doesn't know he's not the father. That's a classic Corrie plot, but it kind of is because they've done that a million times. Like, oh no, Nick's sleeping with two people at once. That's a classic Corrie plot. It is a classic Corrie plot, but it's not what I want from Coronation Street.
I don't mind that so much. I think that stories...
Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying is nobody's going to go, oh, that's classic Corrie.
No. Stories rooted in everyday, recognisable, relatable family situations,
but
to me.
But more traditional.
Yeah.
Not like, Beth's being cyberstalked. Classic Corrie.
No.
It's like Beth's being a bitch to everybody in the factory. Classic Corrie.
You're being snarky again.
I'm not being snarky. Why? How is that snarky? I'm saying...
Something to moan about the things you don't like.
No, I'm not complaining about the things I didn't like, because I liked some of the things I'm talking about here. I'm saying that when you think about classic Corrie, and even the word classic, it embodies imagery of tradition and history.
Yeah.
Right, so you can't say, oh, I really think that the classic story where Cassie orders 2 air fryers for herself off the internet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that's not classic. There's certain traditional things that the new stuff, and maybe this is where Corrie's kind of going a bit wrong, is that it's really focusing on pushing the envelope, being new, and like, revenge porn and what else?
Yeah, just some of the
just
more...
like new stuff. Maybe that doesn't feel classic Corrie. But you can't just only ever have things that have only ever happened before. No,
I think that... But equally, you can't necessarily stick to just the boring drudgery of day-to-day life and expect that people are always going to be interested in it. Although maybe you can if you end up building up the characters more. I think that character-led stories are clearly something that people will often refer to when they're talking about what makes classic Corrie, isn't it? Because you're right, when people say, oh, what do you really like about your favourite era of Coronation Street, I think most people will automatically go to the characters that they'll list.
Yeah,
and
you're
not
right.
the plots.
Yeah. And there are certain characters that are definitely feel more classic Corrie than others.
Yeah, I mean, there can still be classic feeling characters in a post-classic era.
Like, for current Corrie, okay, to me, people like Jenny and Daisy, classic.
Why?
Because you've got a feisty barmaid who's got man trouble, and a intimidating, scary, sassy landlady.
She's not that scary, but I know what you mean. Yeah, confident and brassy.
Yeah, and like for example, Debbie. Debbie is a classic Coronation Street character because she's camp and funny.
I think that counts for a lot, and there aren't too many characters like that these days. Having Julie back in it at the moment, despite the sad storyline that she's found herself embroiled in, she to me screams classic Coronation Street just for that campiness. Is Sean classic Corrie? In a way, I think so. Even though back in the day, back in the very first 30 years of Coronation Street, there weren't any gay characters. But I think that among the current cast,
there's just loads of gay actors.
There just were lots of closeted gay actors in the show back then. But he feels kind of classic.
Fizz and Tyrone, they're classic Coronation Street characters, and I just call them boring, but Coronation Street's been full of like hard done by mums who are just struggling and doing their best with their families, and I think Fizz is a really good example of that kind of person who does their best and tries really hard. Because unexpectedly, this might surprise people, I think she's quite like Gail. When Gail was young and Gail had kids, Gail kind of struggled quite a lot, and there were lots of scenes with her just being like, oh god, got to feed the kids, got to do this, got to do that. There was a lot of like day-to-day drudgery. Even people like Linda and Val, right from the very beginning of the show, there was lots of them like with kids in high chairs, and like they got to get the kids tea ready, and the kids are in the crib and the dad set fire to the house again.
This is Gemma and Chesney at the moment as well, isn't it?
I don't know if I think they're classic.
I think that Gemma as the chav of the street, and I know she's not as chavvy as she always has been, but that's the role that she currently plays, isn't it? And I think that because chav as a relatively modern archetype, to me, doesn't necessarily fit. There wasn't anybody quite like that back in the day.
Just to be contrary here, even though I just said I don't think they're classic, they are kind of like the new Stan and Hilda, because...
What?
I know, everyone's going to hate me saying that. But we were supposed to laugh at Stan and Hilda because they were chavs. There was no such thing as a chav back in the day, but they were the working class, like the lowest of the low.
They were bottom
the ones
rung, weren't they?
That everybody made fun of because they didn't have good manners, they didn't have money, they scraped by, they were always coming up with ridiculous things that they were doing. They were always getting themselves in money trouble, and they always seemed to make it worse for themselves. And, they had their pride. And I think that actually, the more I think about it, the more I really do think Gemma and Chesney are basically modern era Stan and Hilda.
I don't think that they've got quite the same charm
as
Jean Alexander and Bernard Ewan.
I don't think they do.
Oozed from every pore.
I don't think, as viewers, we do not root for Gemma and Chesney at all. And I don't know why that is. Are we harder? Are we less empathetic? Are they less interesting? Are they less charismatic and fun? Or does it feel like society has more safety nets that they're ignoring, that they shouldn't actually be in quite as dire straits as they are, whereas with Stan and Hilda you could see where the problem was.
With Stan and Hilda, that's a classic Coronation Street couple, because Corrie was always about strong women and feckless men, which is why I think that for many people, Gemma, Sally and Tim are still seen as a classic Corrie couple.
With Gemma and Chesney, they're both feckless. See, that's the trouble.
Maybe that's the problem. But when you look at Sally and Tim, you've got exactly the same thing there, haven't you? You've got Sally, who's the aspiring social climber that wants to always do better. She wants to get out of the pit that she's found herself in. And then you've got Tim that's just happy to go to the Rovers, have his beer, sit in front of the TV,
eat posh crisps.
And they kind of really do echo some of those classic couples from the past. And I don't think we've got that with I mean, I suppose Fizz and Tyrone's a little bit like that, but I see them as being more on equal footing. But even back in the day, you had characters like Harry and Concepta that came across as a little bit more equal, didn't you? Yes, Concepta would be there making the tea, but there wasn't the same power balance that you had with Jack and Vera or Stan and Hilda there.
I think one big unanswered question that we all kind of have, but we've never really spoken, is there such a thing as Classic Corrie now? Is it possible to make something that feels like Classic Coronation Street now? And I just don't think it is possible, because I think the world has changed too much. I think there's too much competition, and I think that the way we talk about soaps and the way we expect and demand soaps, you know, what's expected of a soap has changed so much from when it was classic. Like a classic, I think one of the words that I would use to describe classic is cozy. I don't think people think cozy when they watch Corrie now. You don't feel like you're being invited into people's homes. You feel like you've been invited into people's emergencies. And so you can't have that cozy feeling, which is weird, because I do think as a society we crave that. We really do, because there's loads of...
Well, there's so much other rubbish going on in the world at the moment. I think that people would certainly appreciate coziness. I think that's a really good phrase to think about it.
Cozy is a genre of things now, like cozy crime. You know, there's all kinds of things that people watch to take comfort from. And I think Coronation Street could do that back in the day, because what were they competing against?
Yeah.
You know, 3 other channels at one point, and then 4 eventually, and not...
But even Coronation Street, when it got too cosy and boring, like in 1996 when it did, then it was like all emergency, get in Bryant Park and shake the street up a bit. Is that when classic Coronation Street ended? But I think there was certainly elements of what people would refer to as classic Coronation Street in the last few years of the 90s and even going into the early 2000s. And a lot of that is the relationships between the families. Between the characters, going to the pub at the end of the episode, having people mingling and merging, and everybody knowing each other's business. And the closest that we've got really to that these days is people seem to have each other's phone numbers in their address book inexplicably. But there isn't a whole lot of characters commenting on what other people are up to. And when they do, it sometimes seems a little bit tokenistic, like having a random person say, "Oh, Mason got stabbed the other week." But I think that literally everybody knowing each other, which was easier to do when there was a smaller cast, certainly contributes a lot to the classic feel. Yeah,
I know, but we don't do that now.
No, we don't.
When people used to watch it back in the day, they would have gone, "Oh yeah, that reminds me of Mrs. What's-Her-Face," or they wouldn't have watched it and gone, "This is an alien way of life." Whereas now, when people do know each other's business, we do think it's weird. We don't live like that anymore. So can you have... This is what I mean. Can you really have a classic feeling Coronation Street now?
I think you could, if you were to accept that it wouldn't necessarily reflect
the way
what's more important, reflecting changed. Modern life, or holding on to some rose-tinted idea of what a classic Corrie community should be like.
But what I'm saying is, was part of the reason why it felt classic was because it felt like your life at the time. Because I don't think Corrie feels like our life now, but it doesn't feel like a rose-tinted version of life either.
No, for sure. I hear that at the moment EastEnders is doing the community stuff quite well, and people still are, in each other's pockets a little bit more. The other thing with knowing each other's business is something that I see as very Corrie, which doesn't exist too much these days, is the gossip character. Because back in the early days you had Ina, and then for a long period from the mid-90s till just recently you had Norris doing that job, and you had Blanche in the late 90s.
Even Hilda was a bit of a
and I don't think that kind of character exists these days, and I think that Corrie would do well nosy. To get a really nosy character in.
I think loads of people were nosy, and like I just said, even back in the early days, everyone would have I can imagine Elsie, Ina, Annie, Hilda, all, if they heard something, go, "Oh, cool.
Yeah, I mean, we all loved the moment a couple of months ago where Sally was outside her house and she sees Lisa and Carla getting out of the car and having a kiss, and her jaw dropping.
And then she told other people.
Yeah, that felt like a proper classic Corrie moment.
Yeah.
Somebody seeing something and then going and whispering to everyone else about it. And I think that a little bit more of that can help add that classic Corrie feeling.
I don't remember what episode this was in, but there was an episode recently where there were people in the pub and the camera moved in a scene to like between 4 different groups of people, and they were all talking about their own thing, and then maybe one of them overheard something from someone else and started talking about it. That to me is classic Coronation Street.
Yeah,
people,
for sure.
People in the same scene, in the same set, having a different story. Because I don't think that happens very much in a scene in Coronation Street anymore.
It's a cafe is sometimes used for that these days, isn't it?
I think the pub needs to be more central. I think that would help. And I tell you another episode that I thought felt very classic, and that was the speed dating.
Yeah.
Which is weird because I just went on and said, "Oh, technology, you can't have a modern plot that feels classic," but that did feel classic because of how it all fit together. And also another thing I'm going to say that's very, very classic, and I tried to make a thing about what do you call each era, and what's classic and what's vintage and what's modern or whatever. But like proper vintage Corrie, standalone episodes were more the done thing.
Yeah, they were in the very early years, weren't they? Which we get bits of now, like the David episode just yesterday was a bit of a standalone episode. The Mason one was as well.
And I don't know that. Coronation Street certainly I don't think would have ever been as successful as it is if they had stuck to that. I think that making ongoing story plots was the whole point of a sort of soap.
Yeah.
But I think that sometimes just watching antics, I think some of the strongest episodes that Hilda and Stan had were standalone episodes, like Hilda's party, the time that they had to go to the dump to find their whatever they lost.
Yeah, the clothes that they're thrown out. Yeah. I think that. Yeah, I think the community spirit helps an awful lot, even if it doesn't really exist these days. But it's probably something that a lot of us deep down crave, the idea that we all belong together and we're not in this horrible old world alone. So having people knowing each other's business and gossiping over the fence and characters rallying around to support each other. It was quite nice, in the David episode yesterday when he was flat out on the tarmac. You had characters, Asher coming in to help. You had people running in from the medical centre to help him. That was nice. Just the whole rallying around each other sort of thing.
Just imagine the people in the medical centre looking through the blinds and they're going, "They've done it again. There's another bloody thing. There's another emergency. We should go out this time because we never go out normally, do we? We just let them get on with it. We got in trouble the other day. Do you remember? We should go out."
Do you think that it is still possible to enjoy Coronation Street even though you recognise that what you're watching isn't at all classic, isn't it? Because sometimes you'll get episodes on and people will say, "Oh, I hated that. That didn't feel like classic Coronation Street at all." But I don't think that they're not mutually exclusive. Well,
the Mason episode was not classic Coronation Street.
No, it wasn't.
It can be further away.
Yeah. I don't think that the Pat Phelan story was classic Coronation Street, but I still very much enjoyed that. I don't think that the Special Paul narration episode from last year was classic Coronation Street, but that was still enjoyable.
But when does it become classic?
Yeah.
At what point do we say what is classic has changed, or is there always going to be some kind of archetype of what we imagine? I suppose it's like, what we just have a set idea in our heads of certain periods of time, and even if they're not necessarily really what happened, you can't shake it. Like everyone, if I said, "Oh, what happened in the Victorian era?" you can all imagine in your head like, a dark stained oak furniture, people eating gruel and wearing bonnets.
Yeah.
Like, don't think that's necessarily what happened, but
yeah, I think that we've all.
I don't know whether classic Coronation Street does it really actually exist? I don't know.
I think it does.
To me, it's the 60s though.
We're not going to go back to the 60s, but I think lots of new producers will come in and say that they want to return to classic Coronation Street, but with a modern twist. Obviously, Kate Brooks is going gung-ho with the non-linear storytelling, and she's absolutely fine to do all the flashbacks and funny camera effects and all that. I mean, I would say that that's not classic Coronation Street, to have all the extra bells and whistles that current showrunners think that are needed. But there are, despite the fact that viewing figures are slowly dropping all the time, there are still new people tuning in to watch Coronation Street every week as well, I'm sure. And I wonder how many people watching consider what's on at the moment classic for them, and they might go back and watch something from the 90s or the 70s or what have you and say, well, this doesn't feel like Coronation Street at all.
Well, I mean, classic Corrie now to people is what's being shown on ITV.
ITV3, yeah. That's the early 2000s, and
that's not classic, is it? Really?
It still has feelings of classicness, and I think that the community spirit and everybody still feeling in each other's pockets. And yes, there were, you know, standalone stories, but it still did feel like a street where at any moment in the middle of a storyline out on the street, somebody could walk out of their house that isn't anything to do with it and get involved. And that kind of thing doesn't feel these days like it happens so much.
No, because of the way they film it, everybody's separate.
Yeah.
And COVID just made it worse.
Yeah, for sure.
Everybody's quite isolated and stories don't really cross over each other.
Yeah. But yeah, I think what you started off with saying, that the humour well balanced against the drama is absolutely important. And being able to have these dark, depressing stories, but then still have a character jump in with a very inappropriate but hilarious quip. I don't know whether that happens as much these days. It's more just everyone's miserable and somebody else says something miserable. So getting the balance there right would be good. Again, I don't want to go too much into bashing of modern Coronation Street. I want to look at what was good with classic Coronation Street. You can't
have a discussion about what is classic without acknowledging that no one thinks this is classic that's happening now. And why is it? What is different about it? And it is really hard to define. Yeah. And I do think that everyone will have general ideas that they can all agree with. You know, I think the humour and the community and the pub scenes and, you know, but everyone will agree on that. And then when you say, well, when was that then? Almost everyone's going to say a different era. And I do wonder if it is just when you started watching it.
Yeah, I think that does. Because that's the same for like when people think back at, you know, music and video games.
There's nothing wrong with it at all.
No.
It's just it can't
nostalgia
always
is a strong force.
Yeah, nostalgia. And you know, a lot of nostalgia, like I said, is caught up with things that never really happened. But your feelings at the time will, you know, it's how you felt when you watched it too. That's a big important part. Like, what do you feel when you watch a classic episode of Coronation Street? At the end of it, how do you feel? I think
the word cozy, like you said at the beginning, was absolutely right. And even though for me, when there's an episode of Corrie that I feel that feels classic, yes, there might be misery and sadness in there, but generally you're left at the end of an episode with a bit of a warm feeling, or like that was fun, or oh, isn't that nice, rather than just that's really sad for them.
What about suspense?
I hope they're going to be okay.
What about?
I don't think that suspense is necessarily classic Coronation Street. Because that's more of a kind of a duff moment that maybe fits more with EastEnders.
I don't know. I mean, when I think of a classic episodes, I think of the tram crash as like a pretty classic. I mean,
I don't see. I see that as being a bit, you know, outside the norm of the episodes at the time. These days, I don't want to bash modern Corrie. These days, when an accident happens or somebody gets hit by a car, it's like, oh, they'll be okay because it happens all the time these days. But in classic Coronation Street, these kind of big spectacular events were peppered in here and then, so that they had the impact. And it was more still the day-to-day drudgery of life.
But that's how the tram crash was.
Yeah, I suppose so. The drudgery of life, but also the warmth and the tenderness and the connections between people. That's what makes Classic Corrie for me, really.
Yeah, it's caring about the characters.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to feel like there's a lot of people and a lot of things happen, and you don't necessarily care because there's no drama, there's no peril, and there's no connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cozy connections,
characters who are there, who are well developed, who we care about because we know a lot about them, about their character, and not just because of what stories they've been through.
Yeah.
Characters that are there not to teach us lessons or to raise awareness of things necessarily. And there's Corrie, I don't have a problem with it raising awareness or having the issue stories sometimes, but that to me isn't classic Coronation Street. It's just people living their lives. Is Classic Coronation Street. I think we've kind of reached the point where we've said it all really. But again, like the earlier question, if any of you have got any other ideas out there, if you completely disagree with what we said, or if you can think of something that you can't believe that we've not considered here, which is
very possible,
definitely quite possible, do write in and let us know, and we will be sure to read it out next time. But we've made an hour out of tonight's podcast. Do you want to call it a day there?
Yeah, thank you to our two questioners,
Thank you very much,
Tom.
John and Tom. And we will, like we say, get round to some of the other questions that have been sent in this week in due course as well.
So many other things to talk about all the time.
So many other things to talk about.
What's going to happen to David?
I know. Who knows? Right, we're giving it. We're stopping there. Thank you for listening, everybody. Do get in touch. Like us on iTunes and Instagram and Twitter and all the other good things like that. And don't forget to join us this weekend where we will be talking about David's spectacular accident and everything else that's been going on in Coronation Street this week. So until then, goodbye for now.
Bye.
Goodbye.